Morning, everyone. Hopefully, we're all good. We can all hear everything nice and crystal clear. Apologies for the slight delay. We had some last-minute technological issues that always seem to pop up just before we're about to start. But hopefully now everyone's got some video. They've also got some audio as well. If you don't, feel free to write in the chat. Jessie can help you out, or text Jessie. She's there with the mobile in her hand, ready to resolve any issues you might have. 0488 588 455. That's 0488 588 455. She can help you out with everything that you do need. We're very excited to be hosting our first online training today and talking about all things relating to the price inquiry that we do receive. This is always a big topic that we get whenever we do training sessions, and people want to discuss what are the implications of handling price inquiry, what legally can we do, what's the best course of action to make sure that we get as many inspections through the property potentially as possible. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we do start. I'll just turn the volume up there, see if that helps you out, Chris. A couple of housekeeping things before we do start. So everyone's videos and microphones are muted, so you don't need to worry if you're sitting there in your pajamas or you're sitting there maybe with even less than your pajamas on. You're not going to be shown on the screen at any time. Your microphones are all muted as well. So again, you're welcome to say whatever you like behind the scenes. If you do want to ask a question, certainly we encourage this to be as an interactive session as we can. Either just simply raise your hand, put your question in the chat. We can unmute your microphone if you'd like to at that point. Particularly when we start to do some role play, it might be good to get some outside involvement. But we do obviously welcome that interactive training as much as we can. So please do speak up, just write in that chat box or raise your hand, and that will help us hopefully get what we need done. So we're going to start. We're going to start from the start as we generally do, and talk about buyers and how do buyers relate to what we're trying to achieve for our auction properties, which is generally get them sold. Now, one thing we're going to make clear today is a lot of the dialogue we're going to use today is auction related, but it does really correlate across to any price marketing you're doing. So whether that be price point negotiation, tender, expressions of interest, express sale, any of those methods, really there's a lot of similarities, a lot of correlation between what they do in the dialogue we use there and the dialogue we use for auction. In a couple of later sessions we're doing down the line, we're going to examine why we go to auction rather than use those different methods. But for the purpose of today's dialogue training, again, no price marketing dialogue really is one and the same between everything. So we're going to jump straight into it. Let's talk about buyers first and what buyers, the default setting of buyers is. And we face this on a pretty regular basis, particularly in markets that aren't that strong about way buyers actually behave. And what we say is the default setting of buyers is generally apathy. So if you give the buyer a choice to do something, they'll usually do nothing at all. And this is the dialogue that you hear from buyers along the lines of, we're looking at a few others, or we need to speak to our valuer, or we need to speak to our accountant, or we need to get back through the property again, or we need to get our builder through the property. All this is done to really give themselves space away from you and give them time to actually think. Because the biggest fear of every buyer is not necessarily buying the wrong property, it's actually overpaying for the right property. So we want to try and do everything we can to put those fears to the side and let them know that they're not a chance to overpay for this property because the motivation on the other side from our seller is really strong. But that's the thing that we're always battling against, is that default setting of buyers being apathy. If we give them a chance to do something, they'll sit back and generally do nothing. We need to be the people and the salesmen and the saleswomen, the counter argument to that really encourage them to get involved and hopefully engage on our properties. So a starting point on this that I just wanted to very briefly touch on. And our session today is only going to run for about 30 or 40 minutes. We're going to keep it nice and tight, nice and brief. I'm aware there's a few of you that do have other commitments on a Friday, maybe a few long lunches to get to. I'm aware also we've got some people from around Australia and some people from New Zealand as well that are here. So we thank you all as well for tuning in. It's always greatly appreciated. So one thing I want to start with just is the way that we structure our ads. And this is very much to do with particularly auction properties and the way they're written, but it really does also correlate across to any property that we have. Hopefully everyone can see the whiteboard here. We've hopefully resolved our glare issues. We've got that out of the way. So what we've got on our ad is we've got our photo of our ad here. We've got our headline on the property. We've got our lead line, which is the first line into the text, and then we have the body of our text that runs underneath there. So there's 4 components to our ad that we have: photo, headline, lead line, body of the text. One of the frustrations that we see a lot is that we tend to end up wasting our most impactful part of this, which is our headline, by saying the same thing that our photo does. You only need to pick up the Courier Mail tomorrow, or the Gold Coast Bulletin, or the New Zealand Herald, or whatever your local paper may be, and you'll flick on and you'll see a photo of a property, and it's a pretty standard brick and tile house, and it's got a nice big backyard, and the headline says family home with a yard, which is just such a waste of this headline that we've got. For those in the Gold Coast, I challenge you to pick up the Gold Coast Bulletin this weekend and see how many times that you see a property that says waterfront canal home, and then the photo shows the waterfront canal home. So what we want to be working on is this here, which is our photo, this here, which is the body of our text, should be aimed at our core buyer group. So whoever you think the core buyer group of your property might be, whether that be investors, whether that be families, whether that be young professionals, whether that be downsizers, whatever that might be, this should be aimed at our core buyer group. So that's our photo and the body of our text. Where we tend to miss opportunities is these two here, which is our headline and our lead line, should really be targeted at value buyers. So rather than writing our whole ad to try and pitch it all at our core buyer group, your core buyer group is going to be attracted by the photo, and they're going to read through the body of the text because the property suits them anyway. These two in the middle here are really integral pieces to be putting something there that screams value out to the buyers to make sure we get our value-based buyers to inquire also. And again, this doesn't matter whether it's an auction or whether it's a private treaty. At the moment, the market that most of us are in at the moment, our sellers aren't on the market because it's a test the market kind of time. It's a market at the moment in really all places in Australia and in New Zealand as well, that you're not coming to the market unless you've got a compelling reason to do so. So let's assume that all of our sellers are committed to selling, and that's certainly plan A. So let's make sure that our headline and our lead line really scream value. And the way we do that generally is by talking about the motivation of the seller and the circumstances behind the sale. So motivation of the seller, circumstances of the sale, and even sometimes, particularly with an auction campaign, you could use the deadline and the urgency that's behind that as well. So there's some examples out there that have probably pushed the line a fair bit. There was one that I saw that said bank knocking, owner running. That's probably pushing towards the line of maybe going too far. But if your seller's going to give you enough rope to do it, then all you're going to do is create more inspections, or more inquiry, which end result is going to result in a better price anyway. There's another one that we saw a couple of weeks ago that said he heads east, she heads west. So rather than saying, divorce sale and get it done, it's a clever way of actually putting it out there to the market and saying, my sellers in this instance need to sell this property. And remembering that that's the key part, is that the buyers want to deal with sellers that need to sell rather than want to sell. And when we go forward to our dialogue that we're going to talk about, this is what we want to reflect. Are your sellers on the market because they need to sell, or are your sellers on the market because they want to sell? Buyers want to transact with people who need to sell. Now, the argument we're going to get back here is that the people will say, we're going to devalue the property. And owners will say, we're going to make us look desperate. What we want to say to them is, look, Mr. and Mr. Seller, my role is not to make you look desperate, but my role is definitely to make you look motivated. Because if you don't look motivated, I tell you what, there's people who are losing their homes to banks. There are people getting divorced, and there are people dying. They're just three realities and facts of life, and that's always going to occur. And if we don't have motivation in our headline, our buyers are going to discard our property, and they're going to try and find a property where the seller has motivation. Because no buyer ever walks in, or no buyer ever starts the process of buying by saying, you know what, I'm going to make a seller today really happy. I am going to overpay on market by whatever it takes. They all start the buying process thinking, how cheaply can we purchase a property? So let's feed into that. Let's make sure our sellers are okay with us saying that there's motivation there and that they need to sell the property, because the buyers will feed off on what we say and what they can hear. So let's use that dialogue as best we can. So then I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is really crucial with our ads. Is look at your ads that you've got, whether they be online or whether they be in newspapers, and make sure that we're really appealing to both groups. Don't just write your ads for the core buyer group, and don't just write your ads so full of desperation that your core buyer group are going to discard it. We want to be making sure we appeal to both. Because if we appeal to both, we maximise our inquiry, which means more inspections, which means more second inspections, which means more offers, which generally means more bidders. More bidders means a better result, particularly if it's an auction property. Again, guys, if there's any stage you've got any questions or anything you'd like to say, or any objections that your seller might press forward, please say them at any stage. And Jessie is here; she's ready to facilitate the chat, so she can get you up there in the lights. The other thing that might help us, particularly from an auction perspective, on your ads is some dialogue at the bottom that says offers prior encouraged. Now, the old dialogue always used to be that it was offers prior considered. I actually don't like that language because I think that makes it sound like you've got a seller who's testing the market rather than committed to meeting the market. You know, to me, it sounds like the seller's going to sit there on their throne, you know, stroking their Persian cat with their bottle of scotch or their glass of scotch, considering what you might have to say. What we want to encourage is that our sellers want to sell this property prior to. And if you ask most of your sellers, if you give them the option to, 99 out of 100 will take the chance to sell the property prior if they get the money they want. So let's really feed into that. So that dialogue again is offers prior encouraged. So down the bottom of your ads, offers prior encouraged. And when we come into our dialogue training, our dialogue's got to reflect that as well. If someone ever asks us, will they look at an offer prior? Absolutely they will. Absolutely they will. So we'll step forward to that. So the old auction dialogue training or the old no price marketing dialogue training even was always find their budget, agree with them, get them to the auction. And I'm sure most of us have gone through training schools or training seminars or training conferences where that's been the course of the dialogue. Get them on the phone, find out what they've got to spend, tell them that's going to buy the property and get them along to the auction. The problem was that it got done to death, and B, it got done quite dishonestly. So you'd have buyers inquire on a property. They'll say, how much have you got to spend? They'll say, I've got 800. You'll say, great, you need to come along to our auction on Saturday. Great. Same buyer or next buyer rings up, same property. How much have you got to spend? Oh, I've got 600 to spend. Mate, I'll tell you what, you need to be there on Saturday. Not going to tell you anything else other than you need to be there on Saturday. Next buyer rings up. They've got 500 to spend. Mate, you got this auction property on Saturday. I've only got 500 to spend. Am I wasting my time? Mate, I tell you what, if you've got 500 to spend, you should categorically turn up on Saturday. Not going to tell you anything more, but you should categorically be there and be ready to get engaged on this property. That buyer turns up, and so does the 600 buyer. The opening bid's at 650. The property sells for 840, and all of a sudden, those people then are never going to transact through you again. And not only that, are they going to spread around town that you do things dishonestly? So the old auction dialogue training has really, it's evolved now past that. And all I can say to you is that if you're using that dialogue, you're probably going to alienate more people than you actually are succeeding. And you might suck them in once, but you won't get them back for a second time. So we're going to look at how we can actually evolve that dialogue to help our buyers out, because our buyers do want to be helped, but doing the right thing by our seller, which is obviously our charter and our responsibility behind what we do. So what we can say and what we can't say is always a really good starting point for this. Now, I know that there's a number of different states and even a couple of guys from New Zealand on the video training this morning. So I'm going to start with Queensland and talk about the Queensland legislation, because I know the vast majority we've got are from Queensland. And then we'll look at how we can use that dialogue in other states as well. Because Queensland, I was saying to Mark McGoldrick, who's joined us from No Doubt Chile Christchurch today, how Queensland is probably the most regulated state. So if our dialogue flies in Queensland, it's going to fly everywhere else, which is good. So what we can say and what we can't say. Well, we can give recent sales information, but there's a caveat behind that. So the recent sales information that you give to your that you give to your buyers must have been seen and approved by your sellers. So generally how that works is you give them the CMA, the CMA when you appraise the property. They say, yep, that's all good. Those list of recent sales are comparable to our property. And then that's the CMA that we use out there. One of the techniques that we're training, particularly the agents in Queensland, to do to work in with this legislation, but make sure we want to do what we want to do, is use your CMA, appraise the property, then do another CMA for your seller or another list of recent sales, and have this as a wider range. So if we've got a property in the middle here that's say worth 750, our CMA is probably going to contain sales from 7 to maybe the early 8 somewhere. What we want to do is you actually want to widen that range out. So give the CMA to them, list the property up, then go back to them and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to consider this other list of recent sales that we've got. You'll notice there's some sales here that are below the sales that we had earlier on, and there's some sales here that are superior or higher than the sales that we put on your original CMA. This is going to be our marketing CMA. So this is going to be the CMA and the list of recent sales that we make readily and widely available for our buyers. So that's going to be our first focal point, is making sure we do that. Have that they're readily available to the buyers so the buyers can access to it. So there's no problem with giving recent sales out as long as your seller has approved them when you first appraised the property. The next step after that is, what else can we say? We can say what a property has previously been on the market for and what a property has previously sold for. So those are completely okay under legislation. So it gives us a little bit to work with. And if you've had a property that's been on the market before, don't ever be afraid to say that figure, because your buyers will know that figure anyway. So you're better off actually getting it out there, controlling the message and shaping the conversation with the buyers, rather than letting them discover it for themselves and then put their own agenda on top of that. So these are the things that we can say. What we can't say, which is always a fairly long and lengthy list. The biggest one is that we can't give a price opinion. So anything that's opinion-based is not okay in the eyes of the legislation. So effectively what the Queensland Government and what the Office of Fair Trading want to be able to do is that the buyers need to be able to verify what you're telling them. So they can verify these, they can verify that, and they can verify that. So that's completely okay. Things that they can't verify are opinion-based pieces. So that's your opinion on price, your opinion on what the reserve will be, your opinion on buyer feedback and offers. This is another big one that we get a lot, where people say to us, oh yeah, well I just tell them that the buyer feedback has been around this level. You can't do it. It's not a verifiable fact that the buyer can actually go and research that. So if the buyer can't research it, the Office of Fair Trading or the Queensland Government don't want you to say it. So if that's part of your dialogue, chuck it to the side and maybe update it and look at how you can change that. So there's enough here that we can work with without stepping into these grey areas on the side. Now, I'm not so naive to think that no one does this. In fact, I know for a fact that a lot of people still do give price opinions, give areas where they should be, et cetera, et cetera. And look, if that's part of the way you want to operate, that's completely and utterly your prerogative. The problem being is every time you do it, you walk a tightrope. You know, the Office of Fair Trading could be the next call that is behind there. Plus, I think the buyers will appreciate if we give them things that they can verify themselves. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm not going to tell you anything today that you can't actually go up and look up yourself. So I'm going to try and help you as much as I can, and all this stuff that I'm going to tell you, all this information I'm going to tell you, you can actually go back and verify. So we're going to do a bit of dialogue training here, a bit of role play on this, and see a couple of different applications that we can do. We've got Pat Ivy from our team in on training this morning, so we're going to unmute Pat. Pat's a very loquacious young auctioneer that we have in our team, who's very talented. So we're going to get him to do a bit of dialogue role play. So everyone can sort of hear firsthand how it all works out. Hey, Jess there, you're on the screen.
Oops.
That's Jessie. For anyone that's ever done an auction booking through us, you just got a nice close-up of Jessie's face.
Sorry.
There we go. Hey, Pat, how you going?
Can everyone hear me and see me?
They can't see you, but they can hear you.
They can hear you, so you're all good, Pat.
Can't see me. At least you can hear me, though.
Right, so just stay where you are. So, mate, we're gonna talk about a little bit of role play dialogue training. So, I want you to be a buyer that's inquiring on an auction property. For the purpose of this auction property, we're gonna give an appraisal range on somewhere between 720 and 760. And there's going to be a couple of recent sales that I'm gonna hopefully help you with. But Pat, I want you to behave like a typical buyer would behave. Most people, you see this as an opportunity to get one back for all the grief that buyers have given. I'm sure, Pat, you won't pick that up. So off we go, Pat. Ring, ring. Hello, Justin speaking.
Justin, it's Pat here. Look, I've come through your property on Saturday. I'm very interested in it. I know it's going to auction, but my biggest concern is all my friends and family say not to bid at auction. I really do like the home. My wife does as well. How much is it going to sell for?
Look, that's a really good question, Pat. Obviously, that hasn't been determined yet, and that's really only going to be determined on Saturday. And look, my anticipation is that it is going to sell on Saturday. The sellers sorry, the sellers are really clear that the property needs to transact. So they're certainly geared around selling it on Saturday. It would help you. Do you research the market much at all, Pat?
I've seen the sales that you've had on display.
Terrific.
I'm not that aware of the area, unfortunately. I know that I've got, 700 to spend. It's probably not worth my time coming. I saw that the inferior sale on that document was at 720. Is it even worth my time coming along?
Well, look, I'd hate for it to sell at a price, Pat, where you actually would look back and say, gee, I would have paid that. Because ultimately it's my seller's decision as to where the property is going to sell. And one of the real priorities for my seller, or there's a couple for them, is one is time. So the property, they wanted to sell it on Saturday, or they needed to sell on Saturday, because all of their future plans are actually based around the property transacting on Saturday. Now, part of that as well is that the cash contract for them is a priority on Saturday, because that's going to allow them then to fulfill those future plans that are going to be happening off the back of that sale on Saturday. So those two things are going to factor quite heavily into their decision at what price they let the property go on Saturday. You might have seen there was another sale there, Pat, actually in that updated CMA that we got. That one was actually at 680. So we'd see that property. That property had a smaller land content. That was at 26 Fifth Street. That had a smaller land content. But the home wasn't as nice. We probably see this home as being superior to that one. So that sale would probably be inferior if the markets were exactly the same as when that property sold as to this market we've got now. Alternatively, you would have seen there's other sales there that do push up into the eights. Some of those properties, though, we see as being superior to this one. But what we wanted to provide that information was just to give people an idea of where properties are transacting around the area at this present point in time.
Okay. So could I buy this home at 680? Is that what you're trying to say?
Look, I think at 680, Pat, you might have some competition. But again, it's not for me to make a decision as to where the property is going to sell or not sell. That decision is wholly and solely and entirely my seller's.
Yep. Okay. Very good.
So just going to pause on that for a sec, Pat. We're going to keep you on here because I want to go back and do a different dialogue if we don't have access to those recent sales. But there's a couple of points there that sort of Pat brought up. The first one is Pat is asking me for something that I physically cannot give him. So he's asking me where the property is going to sell. Now that hasn't occurred yet. So no matter what I say to Pat, I can't 100% give him what he wants. All I can give him is information. Now, when he baited me at that low price at 680, again, our dialogue should always be, look, at 680, I think you're going to have some competition for the property, but it's not up for me to decide what the property sells for. And part of this is really stepping out of the role of being a gatekeeper on price and actually just allowing it to take care of itself. Not up for me to decide. You're might have some competition, I think, at that level, but I'd hate for it to sell at a point that you look back and you go, you know what? We probably would have paid that. Because that's a real big mistake that you can make as a buyer. So our job is to step out of the way of that and just facilitate the buyer to come through as an inspection. Because our job is just to facilitate inspections. That's all we're trying to do with our dialogue, is to encourage inspections. No one's dialogue or no one's ads is good enough to sell a property on its own. The property sells once people are inside it. So our job is to get people there. Now, Pat in this case said he'd been through the property before, so Pat went slightly off script. But our job is to make sure that those inspections then become second inspections and people see the reason to keep coming through the home. But I like that dialogue that if they bait you at a low price, to say, look, I think you might have some competition at that level, but it's not up for me to decide. Because I think, and I could be wrong here, but my fundamental belief is buyers have an understanding of where things sit in the market roughly. Now, Pat probably knows at 680, he's really unlikely to get that property. Really unlikely. So he just wants me to confirm it for him. But my job is not to confirm or deny it. My job is to say, you should come through the property and make your own research, make your own decisions, factoring into that my sellers need that cash contract. Now, there's going to be two things at play here, Pat. And I want to do another call. I want you to inquire again on a property that you haven't been through this time. And this is a property where we may have no recent sales, or for whatever reason you don't want to talk recent sales. So we're just going to change our dialogue very slightly as to how we do that. Ring, ring. Hello, Justin speaking.
Justin, Pat here. I've obviously seen your property online. It's going to auction. I'm just wondering what the vendors are asking. Doesn't have a list price. I'd like to buy it prior to auction as well. So can you tell me the price?
Look, I can't tell you the price. The only conversations I've had with the seller is around their need to sell the property inside of that 28-day period. So I can't give you a price on the property per se. What I can give you though that may help, Pat, do you mind if I ask where you saw the property?
I just saw it on domain.com.au.
Okay. My advice to you would be, and certainly the other portal that's available to you is realestate.com, is if you go on there and you type in a price, you'll actually see where the property comes up and where the property doesn't come up. And that might help you to make a decision as to where this property could potentially sit in the marketplace.
Okay.
So don't be afraid to use that REA dialogue or domain dialogue to use that price, that back end price that we have to set by law to encourage inspections. Now, just be careful in doing this because by law, and particularly here in Queensland, your sellers need to indicate what that back end price is. So if it's too high, you don't want to be using that figure because it's not going to help you correlate with inspections. But if it's in the right zone, by all means use that. It's an extra tool that we can use to help our buyers along. Sorry, Pat.
How would you deal with this, Justin? If I said to you, I'd like to purchase a property prior to auction, what sort of figure does it need to be to stop the auction from going forward?
Sure. Look, Pat, my sellers haven't had any offers yet. So I don't know where their figure is that they're prepared to take the property off the market and sell it to you tomorrow. And the only thing I can say to you, the only way definitively to know what that figure is let's put it in front of them and I can come back to you with a yes or no. How does that sound?
Yeah, okay, no worries.
Again, we step out of the way of price. Now, if Pat asks me the question, will they look at offers prior? The answer should always be absolutely. In fact, it's their preference, Pat. If you can help them facilitate that, then they're going to be happy. So let's try and get that done.
They'll look at offers prior, but will they sell prior, Justin?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Their desire is to sell this property. So if they can make that happen prior to auction, there's no reason why I can't see that can occur. Now we're not going to step on to the next phase of that, which is how do we handle that dialogue back with the buyer, because that's a session we've got in a month or so's time. So we're going to leave that just to the side for the time being. But our job again is just to facilitate what our buyers want to do, which is inspections and offers. So that dialogue, the way that works is this. We want to create our worth of the property, have this gap in the middle, and then have a figure at the bottom that our buyers can potentially pay. So worth gets established by recent sales figures, by on the market prices and things like that. This figure, this suggestion of what they could potentially pay is motivation, circumstances, deadline. So we need to have both in our dialogue, because if I get on the phone to Pat and I just try and sell him on what the property is worth and really play that price protector, then I'm not going to create any excitement in Pat. But if I get on the phone by the same token and just continually feed Pat line after line after line how my sellers are going to give it away and it needs to sell without actually establishing what the property is worth, it's going to change Pat's perspective on this property. So what we call this in the middle is value. So our definition of auction value is the gap between what something is worth and what we pay. That's what value is. So the best example of this is retail chains who do this to us. Now, for those that can see that with my chicken scratch handwriting, that's the $199 on the price tag with the line through it and then the 99 down the bottom. And we buy that item and we go home to our significant other and we say, guess what, honey? Great news. Just saved us $100. In fact, I bought two of them, so actually saved us $200. That's what we do. We create value by seeing what a property is potentially worth or an item is potentially worth and then having a pay figure that's below that. And then on Boxing Day, they do this. And all of a sudden you have 10,000 people queuing out the front of the city to fight each other for the last pair of shoes because they've discounted the item further. So our job is to do something very similar in real estate. We want to create value by establishing what something is worth. So talk your recent sales figures. Don't be afraid to do that. But make sure your dialogue comes back and always references circumstances, motivation, deadline. And that word circumstances is such a good one. Pat, are you still online?
I am, yes.
Great, Pat. Let's have one more go at this. I want you to ring up and inquire on a property, and I want you to be a really particularly picky buyer.
Sure.
Ring. Hello, Justin speaking.
Justin, Pat here. Look, I'm just with my wife in the car, just driven past property that you've got. I saw the signboard. It says auction. But I know that just must have come to market because I can't see it anywhere online. But are you in a position where I could buy this property off you prior to going to auction? And if so, mate, what price is going to buy it?
Sure. Have you done much research around the market at all, Pat?
Well, again, this one looks like it's just come to market. Literally,
Yeah.
we just looked from afar and saw the signboard company install the board. So we're that eager and we're so intensely in this marketplace that we just drive around your area all the time. But all I really want to know, mate, is what figure will buy this today? I'm sorry to be so picky, but this is just the sort of person that I am.
No, I know what sort of person you are, Pat. I know indeed. Look, don't be fooled by the fact that the property has just come to market in that the sellers aren't ready to sell the property yet. The sellers actually, in all the conversations I had with them, had really said that they want to get this one done as a priority. In fact, the circumstances behind the sale are such that the quicker the sale might actually be, the better.
Why are they selling, Justin?
Sorry, what was that, Pat?
Well, why are they selling? You said the circumstances forced the sale. Was there a murder there?
Look, I can say there wasn't, Pat, but what I can say is that the circumstances are not mine to go into. So just the fact that the property needs to sell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you some recent sales information, Pat, to your email address. So that'll help you out with having some of that information there for your research purposes. There's a couple of properties on there. There's one at 26 Smith Street that's sold that's probably inferior to this property. There's another property there at 28 Jones Street. That one sold for $820.
We went through that recently.
What's that, sorry?
We went through 28 Jones Street recently.
Yeah, so that property was bigger than this one. It had a larger yard as well and a slightly better aspect. So we probably see that property as being superior to this one if all the markets and all the circumstances were exactly the same. And there's a property there, as you mentioned, in Smith Street that's probably inferior to this one. But look, our job is really to get the sellers moving. Their indication for us when we spoke, they actually didn't speak about a price. They spoke about selling the property. So my job is to help them out. So if you're in a position where you could potentially buy the property quickly, Pat, that might definitely work in your favour. So when can we get you through?
Well, I'm literally at the front still now. Is there any chance you can come through, the next 20 or 30 minutes? But before you...
Yeah. I'm an agent, so I just sit around all day just waiting for your call to take you through.
All these agents seem to.
Nothing would
waste your time. Would 700,000 cash buy it today, Justin?
Yeah, great. Well, I'll tell you what, Pat, I'll drop everything. I'll come straight across to you.
Very good. Mate, that sounds good to me. Thank you.
Good. So don't use that last 10 seconds of dialogue there, but it's funny what buyers' attitudes are, and even agents, when they masquerade as buyers, how their attitudes are. So the word that I used there a lot was circumstances. I really like the word circumstances because there's always a circumstance behind a sale. Might be that they want a bigger house, might be they want a smaller house, it might be that there are some compelling circumstances, divorce, death, bank, that are behind it. But the word circumstances just throws it out to the buyer and says, the circumstances are there, the property needs to be sold, not mine to go into, but suffice to say the property needs to transact. Now, when we say the word circumstances to a buyer thinks divorce, death, bank. So it actually works in our favour because it starts to create motivation and value. But there again, we want to establish this price at the top, our worth price, and then pull it back by talking about value underneath that. Guys, before we press on past this, and we're coming up to our last 5 or 10 minutes, is there any questions about this or any situations you've got in your local area that might change this, or it might be different dialogue that you need to talk about? Or any issues that you frequently face? Feel free to just put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we can jump you on the microphone if you'd like. If not, we'll keep moving along.
Justin, can you tell me the reserve price?
Well, the reserve price yet, Pat, hasn't been set. So the reserve price will only be set if the property makes it to auction, and it'll be set in the immediate hours prior to the auction. So no, I can't reveal the reserve price.
No problem.
Yeah. So again, the dialogue there is that the reserve price will only be set if the property makes it to auction. So we can use little dialogue pieces that actually keep throwing motivation or keep throwing a bit of urgency back in the buyers. Because again, that default setting we're fighting against all the time is apathy. They want to sit and wait. Our job is to give them a compelling reason that they stop sitting and waiting and they engage. So look, if the property makes it to auction, we'll set a reserve at that point, rather than just saying, the reserve will be set the day before or a couple of days prior to the auction. So just keep winding that dialogue into our buyers as best we can.
Justin, when you're doing your pre-auction calls and you're trying to generate as much interest and registrations for Saturday as possible, are you allowed to use the phrase, the reserve has been set aggressively low, or is that not being able to use it? And what would you use to try and tempt people in?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't use that word. I wouldn't use that word. I don't know, like aggressively low, because then if you get in a negotiation position, our reserves are generally high, and you go to them and you tell them reserve is aggressively low, and then you tell them the reserve's 150 grand above the market, you're going to lose a bit of faith. If it is aggressively low, then you can probably run with that.
I like it's aggressively low in the vendor's opinion and in the agent's opinion, but the market feedback's been $75,000 or $100,000 below where the vendor expectation was. And are you still able to use that phrase, or again, would you try and avoid it?
I try and avoid it. We're stepping forward a little bit here, but what I like the word unbelievable, Pat. The reserve is unbelievable, because unbelievable can be unbelievably good or unbelievably bad. It's a little bit so to say, look, Pat, reserve's been set. It's unbelievable. We're all looking forward to Saturday. Now we're going a little bit sort of waylaid there, but that's what I like as dialogue, because it's a little bit more. I think aggressively low, you might paint yourself into a corner that you may not be able to respond from. Ronnie Marshall down in Victoria. Hey, Ron, hope you're going well. Saw the property was listed for sale at $770 6 months ago. Obviously, they couldn't get it then. Is that still what they're after? Really good question, Ron, for properties that were previously a private treaty. So what we want to say here is you want to say, look, folks, jump on the front foot, say it straight away as soon as you get on the phone call. Yeah, look, the property was on the market for $770. Obviously, it didn't sell at that. My sellers now, circumstances have changed and they're in a position where the property needs to sell. So we can use that dialogue to sort of change it a little bit because based on the fact the property was on the market, but we want to own the fact that it was on the market and it didn't sell at that. Because realistically, it's going to do the David Jones thing to them anyway, where they'll think 770 is actually the worth price, and then how much less than that can we get? Because I guarantee if they buy this property for 690, this will be the conversation at the House when we barbecue. Oh, mate, you should have seen it. This property was on for 770. We got it for 690. Hey, we knocked 80 grand off the price. Well, this price was never an actual price, just like the David Jones sweater was never $200. But that'll be the mindset behind it. So, Ronnie, you're exactly spot on. Own that price straight away, put it out to them, but then follow it up with a line of saying, obviously it didn't sell at that price. My sellers are now in a position where the property needs to sell. You know, after being on the market for 6 months, they're getting now closer to a point where the circumstances are that the property needs to transact. Pete wrote, what if you have a duplex, the seller is overcommitted on the build? How do you promote this? Again, I think you can only do that by creating value. And creating value in that case, Pete, I think is going to be talking about the good build and the good features behind it, but then pulling into a fact where you might say something like liquidates the sale or freeing up assets or something like that that actually kind of sends that hidden message behind it that says, hey, this is not a bad property for you to be engaging in because my seller needs to move it on for whatever reason that might potentially be. One of the best ads that I saw, and I was actually up with the guys in Townsville, Mackay, Explore Property Mackay a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this to them. Professionals at Paradise Point, I'm not sure if any of you guys are on here, but they had an ad, and one of their agents, Chris, had an ad where it said, divorce, deceased estate, liquidating assets, bank reclaiming. And then down the bottom in fine print, it actually said, choose your cliche, this property needs to be sold. So something like that is super clever because it grabs the attention of the buyers, but then pulls it back and says, hey, you can use whatever, trot out whatever line you want on this property. The fact behind this property is that it needs to sell and it needs to transact. So the last couple of things I wanted to finish off with. The first one is email inquiries. You should have a template pre-written for your email inquiries that's very similar to this. So as soon as you list an auction property, find your list of recent sales, find your high marker and find your low marker and have those written in your template. So say I'm going to attach a list of recent sales for you to peruse. You'll notice there's a sale in there at 26 Fifth Street, sold for 680. That property didn't have this. There's another property that sold at 820. That property was superior in this way. So a couple of points there where we can start to get that going, but then have that last paragraph on the email that says something along the lines of my sellers are committed to this auction. They need to sell the property prior to the 28th of May. So look, what it's worth and what it sells for could be two different things. You know, and another line that you can use a lot in your dialogue training that might help us. You know, what it's worth what it sells for could be two different things. But rather than every time you get an email inquiry sitting there and getting filthy on the world and going, oh, look at this again, and tapping away and send phone number and everything, just have a template that's there, cut and paste, ready to go. And you want to have something at the bottom that says, do you have a phone number that I can contact you on to talk about this further? Some buyers will give it to you. A lot of buyers won't. That's okay, because if you get that message out in your template, you've hopefully hit the right home run anyway, which is going to result in that inspection. The last thing that I wanted to finish off with before we open up to any questions that we might have is talking about how we actually can create some inspections inside that first week. Sorry, we got another question. Jesse just said, where did you appraise the property? Thanks, Mark. Just saw that one. Where did you appraise the property? This is a really interesting one, because in New Zealand, the appraisal figure is such a more significant figure than the appraisal figure in Australia. The appraisal figure in Australia is kind of like, here's my opinion, good luck to you. If it's in New Zealand, it's actually part of your legislation. So there, I wouldn't shy away from this, Mark. I would actually say, look, where I gave the recent sales on this property is here. But then you want to kind of come back to that and say, look, the thing that we assume when we appraise a property is that all of our buyer circumstances, all of our seller circumstances, all of our market conditions are all exactly the same, which is never the reality. So appraising a property is designed to give the sellers a guide of where they could potentially sell the property and then facilitate their next move. It doesn't play a reference point in the sale of our property. My sellers have told me they want to see what the market has to say, because that's going to be the true appraisal of property. But Mark, I'd be on the front foot and I'd give that out, because I think if you try and hide it, you're going to end up creating a bit more kind of tension between you and the buyers. Laura said, if they hate auctions, which is every buyer, and let you know they'll not come through because of this, what dialogue would you use to get them in the door? I always find this funny with this, and we might actually, Laura, if you're there, we might just put you on the microphone. I hope you don't mind. And I might role play this with you, because this is actually a really common one too, where buyers will have a real reluctance to engage us and a reluctance to inspect a property because of the fact that they hate auctions. So Laura, I've unmuted you. We've unmuted you. Can you hear me? Can you speak? Laura picked a bad time to go get a coffee. You're still on mute. Laura, we'll try now. Laura's coming in the room.
Always hear it back up, Nick.
All right, Laura, if you're not there, I might use Pat again. So Pat, let's talk about this. So Pat, you're going to be a buyer that hates auctions. So let's have this conversation.
Sure.
Hello, Justin speaking.
Justin, Pat here. Mate, I absolutely hate auctions, and I hate the fact that you've listed a very nice home for auction. But I just want to know what the price is, mate. Surely you've got a guide that you can give me.
Sure. Well, I can send you a whole lot of information regarding recent sales and that, Pat, but I'd love to talk about why you hate auctions in the first instance. What about auctions is that you don't like?
Surely you've got a guide, mate. I don't need to see the recent sales. I just want a figure.
Okay. What about auctions is it that you don't like, Pat?
Mate, I've just got friends and family that have had bad experiences at them, and they've told me just not to waste my time at auction, but it just seems, and it's so frustrating, all the good properties go to auction.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's the paradox we kind of live in, Pat, isn't it? Look, I think the thing that I'll say to you, and a lot of people buying at auction does make them a little bit uncomfortable, because there isn't a price that you can kind of see and then work off as a figure. And I understand that most of the things that we buy as consumers, there's usually a price there, so you can feel a bit more comfortable about having some certainty as to price. On the other side to that, Pat, I'd like to say is, look, the reason why we think actually buying at auction is a really good idea is because of two things. The first thing is that you know you're dealing with a seller that wants to transact on the property. So our sellers have gone to auction for the reason of not necessarily maximising competition, but achieving a cash unconditional contract on their property within that 4-week barrier, because that's the key point here. The second thing is what you'll find, Pat, is that if you're actually one of the braver people that actually does buy at auction, you'll actually have less competition. So there's a lot of people that are similar to you that don't like auctions, and because of that, they'll actually hang back and wait for properties to get passed in. If you're one of the brave ones who actually steps forward and inquires, well, that's actually going to put you in a really good spot with less competition, because you'll actually end up saving money. And what we tend to find a lot is that buyers will have to pay more money after the auction or on priced properties because of the fact that there's more competition post. It just opens the door for more people. So what you actually want to be doing, Pat, is that if you can get in and buy it before those people enter the race, because of the terms of the contract are in the favour of the seller, and that's a priority for them, you might find that you end up saving yourself $20,000, $30,000, $50,000. I don't know about you, Pat, but paying off $20,000, $30,000 or $50,000 that I didn't have to pay for an extra 20 years is going to sting me a little bit.
Yeah, that's very true. All right, well, when's the auction and what do I need to do in order to bid at auction?
Well, 28th of May is the auction, Pat, but if you really don't like buying at auction, we could try and facilitate you buying this property beforehand. So how about we start by getting you through the property, seeing how you sit. I'll give you some recent sales information that'll help you out with price a little bit, and then we can talk about the next step from there.
Sure, sounds good to me.
So I think you really want to kind of nip this in the bud a little bit, and let's own this and say buyers don't like buying at auction because it makes them do something that they don't commonly do, which is buy things without a price. So that's where that kind of, rubber hitting the road moment sort of comes to them. They don't like that. Plus, it's the opposite to their default setting, which is apathy and hanging back and waiting. Auctions are about urgency and buying now, so committing to something. So that's why they don't like them. But if we point out to them and say two things: number one, you're gonna have less competition, which is great for you. Number two, you're gonna be dealing with a seller who needs to sell their property. And a seller cannot be more motivated than setting a date that they want to transact on their property. So it's so important that we keep feeding that back to the buyer. My seller cannot be more motivated than saying on the 28th of May, they are going to sell their property. That is uber, ultra, apex motivation. So keep using that back to them. So you can hang back and wait, and maybe the property might get passed in, you might miss out, but if it does, you might end up paying more money, or you could be brave, let me help you, and you might end up saving yourself money across the next 50 or so years. Thanks for that question too, Laura. I appreciate, not that you hung around, you had to shoot off, but thank you for being there. The last thing that I sort of wanted to trail off with is talking about what our next session is. So the 25th of May is our next session. We're going to talk about at the listing table, price marketing versus no price marketing. What are the benefits of both? How do we present both options in front of our seller to hopefully get them to choose the right path for them, and also that we believe for the property. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We're going to shoot you out a quick survey at some stage today, probably inside the next couple of hours, just to get your thoughts and your feedback. This is our first training, so we want to make sure that we optimize it to get it better and better and better for the future. Really appreciate you guys tuning in, and any questions, feel free to send them through. Thanks.